Today, we are going to make some grass. No, I'm not in Colorado, so it's not going to be that kind of grass. It's our techniques that are so simple and sensible, your mowers have practically built themselves. Hello folks, it's Mad Dog Merv. Welcome to my 2-year anniversary show. And today, well, one of the things we're going to talk about, besides, well, the 2-year anniversary and some of the videos that we've done this last year, we are going to talk a little bit about funny cars. And this building behind me, well, it ties into that like you wouldn't believe. So stick with us, folks, and learn a little bit about this this mysterious building in the background. And welcome to my 2-year anniversary show. Well, this last year we had a few pieces of the echoes from the chalkboard added, some of the elementaries and some of the high schools, and in fact a train wreck that took the life of some students. We talked about that this last year. Speaking of trains, well, of course, that's one of the main things we do here on the channel, and well, we had our monthly installment of the layout and the train of the month, basically, and we're going to continue that. We actually built some really fun ones this year. This Daylight is definitely one of my favorites. We went to some train shows as well and looked at some of the professional stuff that's out there. I call it professional stuff. It's so much better than what I got, but hey, I'm kind of new to it. Speaking of trains, we went to the Golden Spike, the 150th. That was a whole lot of fun. And the Big Boy came into town, and we went to see that as well. We also went out to Tooele and looked at the Tooele Railway Museum, and out to the Tintic Range area, looked at some of the rails out there. We looked at navigation arrows here in the state of Utah, learned a little bit about those. Turning to models, we talked a little bit about Mustangs and pink Mustangs and some of the car builds that I do here on the channel. And one of the really weird ones was, well, this chopper, this 3-wheeled chopper that I put together a few years ago. World of Tanks, of course, we have our World of Tanks series, and a couple of the tanks that I've done in the World of Tanks series, and there's more of those to come this next year. We've talked about scenery for models and dioramas and train and whatnot. Learned how to make rocks, which is kind of fun. And we've even modeled some structures like this church here for the train layout. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And we've got out on the road. We've got to see some beautiful sunsets. This upcoming year, well, we're going to get out and we're going to chase some more rails. We're going to look at some more abandoned grade out there. We'll learn more about railroad history, and we're going to learn more about the airport, the Salt Lake City Airport, and some of the history there in Salt Lake in general. We are going to actually finally go out and see my friend, the world's most interesting modeler who had the biggest collection of airplanes at one time. We're going to build more structures for the railroad. Here's the Munster House. That's going to be coming up before long. And we're going to talk about some of my old cars, which we tend to do quite often here, this Cougar and some of the other cars that I've had over the years. So getting back to that dealership that was in the opening scene, here it is. This was back when it was a Nash dealership, but eventually it became Lake Lincoln Mercury here in Salt Lake City. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, it was Lake Lincoln Mercury. And it is just south of 500 South on West Temple. And what's significant about this? Well, there used to be a guy running a funny car that was sponsored by Lake Lincoln Mercury here locally. And this is a 68 Cougar funny car. Isn't that cool? Back in the day, I believe it was a 289 engine that powered this, and it was fuel injected and ran mostly in Salt Lake, but the different drag strips in Salt Lake, but also some other ones in Utah, and I believe this picture here was actually taken in Colorado. That car was painted the next year. I have an old hot rodder friend, Bill Chastain, who remembers this car, and this was actually taken right up against the freeway on about 24 South and State Street. And he remembers when the car came in, it was white, and they repainted it to blue, And you can see Lake Lincoln Mercury, and by this time it has a blown small block in it. Really cool, a 68 Cougar funny car. Here's another picture of it. I'm not sure where this one was taken. Somebody had said this was over in Colorado, but you can definitely see the blown engine in it. Really, really cool. You know, I love Cougars, and Cougar funny cars are awesome. But I started studying a little bit about some of the local racers, and there was a guy named Mike Reynolds. And I remember Mike Reynolds from when I used to be out at Rocky Mountain Raceway. And, well, Mike, I remember back in the days I was going out there as a teenager, had this Mustang funny car. Really cool looking. And I wanted to build a model of one of his cars, and I found out that he actually ran a 68 Mustang funny car back in the day. There's his number 555, and he was sponsored by Petty Ford. Well, Petty Ford's where my dad used to work years ago. He was sponsored by Petty Ford. Isn't that cool? Mike Reynolds' first funny car here in Utah. So I researched out as best I could. Couldn't find any pictures of the car. I really wish I could have. So I just kind of guessed on a few little pieces here. But this is my representation of Mike Reynolds of Utah, his driver number 555, his funny car, sponsored by Petty Ford. I had to make the Petty Ford decals on my printer, and you can see, yeah, they didn't turn out great. I really need to find a better way to do that with maybe a clear decal. But regardless, I do have all that information in one of my programs, and if I ever choose to redo those markings, I can redo them. So anyway, this is kind of a fun one-off funny car, if you will, from my collection. Very local flair to it. I decided to detail this one up. I put brake lines in it and fuel lines in it and spark plug wires. Gave him a fuel injected 427. I really don't know what he was running back then, but this came out of a kit, and I thought, well, we'll just go ahead and go with this one. It's got the Loggy chassis that was very popular at that time. So this really got me thinking, what if I were to have a funny car back in the day? Or what if I were to build a nostalgia funny car? Well, how about this? Brewmeister. Merv Brewer's Brewmeister. Yes, I made these decals on my printer, and these actually turned out really, really good. For some reason, these look a whole lot better than the other ones I've made. But this was the Billy Meyer funny car kit way back when, and it's kind of a representative of like an 85 Mustang funny car. So I used the colors that were supposed to be on the kit, put some other sponsor decals on it, and well, gave it my name, the Brewmeister. There's the guy with the lederhosen and the great big beer stein. Gave myself the number 420, and didn't detail up the chassis or anything on this, but I think it turned out pretty good. Yeah, it would be fun someday. I'd love to have a nostalgia funny car. Anyway, speaking of Mustang-bodied funny cars, I found out that Scott Coletta, back in the day, had like an 85 bodied Mustang funny car. And, this would have been when he was in his late teens, early 20s. Because Scott's, he would be really close to my age had he not passed away in a terrible accident several years ago in Englishtown. But I wanted to build a model of his car, and here you go, the Bounty Hunter, Coletta Flying Service. So I believe this is one of Connie's old funny cars that he gave his son. Anyway, Scott upgraded a couple of years later to this particular car, this Oldsmobile, which I love this body style. That Olds body style. I think they're beautiful cars, and the colors on it were nice. And, I'm a big Scott Coletta fan. Before he died, I was a Scott Coletta fan. Actually got to meet him at a race. Here's another view of that same funny car. So, actually, guess what I had to do? Yep, for sure. This was one of the cars I had to build, and we actually had decals out of this car. So, of course, I built it. So here's my rendition of the Scott Coletta Oldsmobile funny car. And it's one of the pieces of my collection I'm very proud of. You know, back to the Cougars, there was Fast Eddie Sharpman that back in the late 60s, before he went to Pro Stock, actually ran a funny car. And here's his 68, and he had a 69 model that I don't have a picture of, but I went ahead and modeled the 69 car, his 1969 Cougar funny car with the 427 single overhead cam in it. And somewhere I did see some kind of a picture of this, but I just don't have it in my collection. But anyway, pretty decent rendition of what his car was. Well, again, I love Cougars, and back in the day, here you had 777. Very nice looking burgundy and white Mustang funny car that I believe this was, I can't remember who the sponsor was, Wins, that's it. The High Country Cougar that ran out of Colorado. Well, here I built a model of it. This is my version painted in a little Tester's burgundy, that little teeny bottle that they put out. It's kind of a fun little build and a neat part of my collection, these Cougar funny cars. So, speaking of funny cars, you know, if I'm going to have one, my friend Mark should have one too, right? So, his 72 Demon, which I have a model of, I had a 71 version of the Demon available, and I actually made it into a funny car. So what if Mark would have had a funny car? I know, 71 Demon. This is the actual paint job that Mark had on his 72 right before he sold it. This is the last paint job he had, with the beautiful blue paint and the silver stripes that went all the way to the back. I figured this was a good way to pay homage to his final paint job on his regular car. Hey, let's give him a funny car. What the heck, you know? Yeah, Mark Miller as the driver. I think it looks pretty good. Even has the Mopar hood scoop that he had on his actual 72. He had a Mopar hood scoop that was similar to this. Obviously, this is just a little bit bigger. And the reason I gave Mark the number 705, because that's where he lived, was 705 Redwood Road back in high school. Yeah, kind of fun, nostalgic. I always wanted to do a General Lee model, but everybody else has a General Lee model. And I thought, why not a General Lee funny car? So I got this. It was like the Hawaiian Tropic Charger funny car model that was out. And I painted it Omaha orange. And I put the markings on it. I plumbed it. You can see the fuel lines, the brake lines, the everything. You know, there's even a return spring on the engine. But yeah, there you go. This is another one of those fun funny cars that I put together. Oh yeah, you can see the pineapples there in the back window. I hope you've enjoyed this funny car piece. I've got over 100 funny cars, so trust me, there's going to be other parts to this. This is just part one. But thanks for watching the second anniversary show and for helping to make this channel what it is. Really appreciate you folks.